The fog clung to the ancient stones of Harrington Manor like a shroud, its Victorian spires piercing the gloaming sky of 1925 England. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of polished oak and impending doom. Lord Reginald Harrington, the reclusive master of the estate, raised his crystal goblet in a toast to his assembled guests, his enigmatic wife, Lady Evelyn, his prodigal son, Arthur, the loyal butler, Mr. Graves, and the sharp-eyed visitor, Monsieur Hercule Poirot. As the wine touched his lips, a spasm contorted his face. He collapsed, gasping, his eyes wide with accusation. The room froze in horror. Who among them had orchestrated this fatal sip? The little grey cells stirred in Poirot's mind. The game was afoot. Chapter 1. Arrival in the mist. The motor car's headlamps carved twin tunnels through the fog, yet the manor refused to appear. Hercule Poirot sat forward on the leather bench, gloved hands folded over the silver head of his cane, watching the night swallow the road. The driver, a taciturn Yorkshireman named Briggs, had not spoken since the railway station at Whitby. Poirot approved of silence. It left room for the little grey cells to arrange themselves like soldiers before parade. At last the wheels rattled over gravel, and the house rose out of the mist, as though the earth had exhaled a single, deliberate breath. Harrington Manor. Gothic, Victorian, and unforgiving. 3 stories of blackened stone, lancet windows glowing amber against the darkness, chimneys exhaling slow plumes that curled and vanished like guilty secrets. Ivy clung to the walls in thick ropes, as if the house were being slowly strangled by its own past. A single gas lamp flickered beside the porte-cochere, painting the portico in bruised gold. Briggs killed the engine. The silence that followed was so complete that Poirot heard the fog itself dripping from the eaves. "Nous y sommes," Poirot murmured. He stepped down, shoes crunching on wet gravel, and inhaled. Coal smoke, wet boxwood, and something metallic, iron, perhaps, or old blood. The scent of English country houses always carried that undernote, a reminder that every great family had buried something beneath the rose beds. The front door opened before he reached it. A rectangle of warm light spilled across the steps, and a woman appeared framed against the glow. Tall, slender, dressed in midnight blue velvet that caught the lamplight like water. A single rope of pearls lay against her throat, rising and falling with a breath that seemed rehearsed. "Monsieur Poirot." Her voice was low, cultivated, the accent of finishing schools and London seasons. "I am Evelyn Harrington. My husband insisted you be met personally. The fog plays tricks on strangers." Poirot removed his hat and inclined his head with exactly the degree of courtesy required by a woman who had once been presented at court. "Madam, the tricks of the fog are nothing compared to the tricks of the human heart." "I am enchanted." She smiled, but the expression did not reach her eyes. They were the colour of winter water, pale, depthless, watchful. "Graves will take your valise. Come in before the damp seeps into your bones." The butler waited in the shadow of the doorway. A tall, gaunt man, in immaculate black, faced the texture of old parchment. His eyes were the flat grey of pewter. When he bowed, the movement was so precise it might have been measured with a ruler. "Monsieur." Graves's voice was a whisper of starched linen. He relieved Poirot of coat, hat, and cane without seeming to touch them. The hall beyond was vast enough to swallow a Parisian apartment. A double staircase swept upward beneath a hammer-beam roof. Suits of armour stood sentinel along the walls. A fire roared in a hearth carved with snarling wyverns. From somewhere high above, came the slow, deliberate tick of a long case clock, each stroke falling like a judge's gavel. Poirot paused on the threshold, letting the house settle around him. He catalogued details the way other men counted rosary beads. The faint scent of beeswax overlaying something sharper, carbolic perhaps, the Persian runner whose colours had been muted by a century of boot leather, the portrait above the stair of a bewigged ancestor whose eyes followed the newcomer with chilly disapproval. "Tell me, madame," he said softly, "how many souls inhabit this ark tonight?" Lady Evelyn's fingers brushed the pearls at her throat. "Only the family, the staff, and yourself. My husband dislikes crowds." A hesitation, featherlight. He dislikes surprises even more. From the upper landing came the scrape of a match. A young man leaned against the balustrade, cigarette glowing like a red eye. Early 30s, lean, dressed in a dinner jacket cut a fraction too sharply for the country. His hair was the colour of wet sand slicked back with brilliantine. When he smiled, it was the smile of a man who had learned early that charm was a weapon. "Mother, you're monopolising our celebrity." He descended with the lazy grace of a panther. "Arthur Harrington, at your service, Monsieur Poirot. Father's been boasting about your exploits since the Orient Express affair. Says you're the only man alive who can make Scotland Yard look like a parcel of schoolboys." Poirot studied the sun. The eyes were his mother's, winter water, but hotter, restless. A pulse beat visibly in the hollow of his throat. Debts, Poirot thought at once. Monte Carlo, perhaps, or the new gaming hells in Jermyn Street. The cut of the dinner jacket was Savile Row, but the cuffs were frayed, the onyx studs were paste. "Enchanté, monsieur. Your father flatters me. I am merely a man who dislikes disorder." Arthur's laugh was soft, almost affectionate. "Then you've come to the wrong house." Graves materialized at Poirot's elbow. "Your room is prepared, sir. The green suite, east wing. If you will follow me." Poirot bowed to mother and son and ascended the staircase. Halfway up, he paused ostensibly to admire a tapestry Persephone dragged screaming into the underworld, but, in truth, to listen. Behind him, Evelyn's voice dropped to a murmur. "Must be careful, Arthur. He notices everything." "Let him notice," the son replied. "We've nothing to hide." The lie hung in the air like perfume. The green suite was a cavern of emerald damask and mahogany. A fire crackled in a grate wide enough to roast an ox. Graves set the valise on a stand, turned back the counterpane with reverent care, and indicated the bell-pull. "Dinner is at 8, sir. Lord Harrington dines punctually." "Tell me, Graves," Poirot said, removing his gloves one finger at a time. "How long have you served the family?" 32 years, sir." The butler's face remained impassive, yet something flickered behind the pewter eyes. Resentment, perhaps, or simple exhaustion. "And in those years, have many guests arrived in fog such as this?" "Few, sir. Fewer still have left unchanged." Graves bowed and withdrew, the door closed with the finality of a coffin lid. Poirot crossed to the window. Beyond the leaded panes the fog pressed close, turning the world to milk. Somewhere below, a dog barked once and was silenced. He opened the casement. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet yew and something sweeter, jasmine, dying on the vine. Far below, a lantern moved along the terrace. Graves, perhaps, or another shadow with business in the dark. He closed the window and turned to the room. On the mantel stood a porcelain shepherdess, one arm missing. On the writing desk lay stationery embossed with the Harrington crest, a wyvern rampant, clutching a broken sword. Poirot lifted a sheet to the light. The paper was heavy, expensive, but the watermark revealed it had been manufactured in 1919, after the war, when every penny counted. Ostentation masking penury. He folded the sheet into a precise square and slipped it into his waistcoat pocket. A soft knock. The door opened to admit a maid, no more than 20, apron starched to knife edges, eyes wide with curiosity and fear. She carried a copper can of hot water. "Begging your pardon, sir. Her ladyship thought you might wish to shave before dinner." Poirot smiled his most benevolent smile. "You are most kind, mademoiselle. Clara, sir." She bobbed a curtsy, spilling a drop of water on the turkey rug. "Clara Wren." "And have you been long in service here, Clara Wren?" "Since I was 14, sir. Born in the village. Me mum was housemaid before me." She hesitated, then blurted, "They say you can read minds, sir. Is it true?" "Alas, no. I read faces, gestures, the small lies people tell when they believe no one is watching." He took the can from her trembling hands. "Tell me, Clara, does Lord Harrington keep a locked room in this house?" Her pupils flared. "The West Tower, sir. No one goes there. Not since—" She caught herself, bit her lip. Since Miss Functional, a deeper voice cut across the corridor. "Clara, her ladyship requires tea in the drawing-room." The girl started like a deer. "Coming, Mr. Graves," she fled. Poirot poured the hot water, steam clouding the mirror. In the misted glass, his reflection looked suddenly older, the moustache less triumphant. A locked tower. A maid terrified of her own tongue. A son who smiled like a card sharp. A wife whose pearls hid bruises of the spirit, and a host who disliked surprises. He selected a tie the colour of gunmetal, knotted it with military precision, and addressed his reflection. "Mon vieux, you came for a quiet weekend. Instead you find a chessboard where every piece bleeds. Eh bien, let the game begin." Downstairs, the grandfather clock struck the 3/4. Its chime lingered, discordant, as though one string had snapped years ago, and no one dared replace it. Poirot descended the great staircase, each step measured, cane tapping a soft counter-rhythm. In the hall, the fire had burned lower. Shadows crouched in the corners like conspirators. Lady Evelyn awaited beneath the Wyvern portrait, a vision in sapphire silk. She extended a gloved hand. "Monsieur, my husband is in the library. He is not himself this evening. The journey from town was trying. Lord Harrington is indisposed, merely tired." Her smile was glass. "He asked that you join him for a sherry before we dress." Arthur lounged against the newel post, swirling a crystal tumbler. "Father's been at the decanter since luncheon. Says it steadies the nerves." He raised the glass in salute. "To crime, Monsieur Poirot. May it always be detected." Poirot's eyes flicked to the amber liquid. "And may the innocent sleep soundly, monsieur." Graves appeared as if conjured. "This way, sir." The library lay beyond a suit of armour whose visor had been welded shut. Curious, thought Poirot, for a house that prided itself on ancestry. The door was oak, studded with iron. Graves opened it soundlessly. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke and the scent of old leather. Books rose in tiers to a painted ceiling where nymphs disported themselves beneath indifferent gods. A single lamp burned on a vast desk, illuminating the man who stood behind it. Lord Reginald Harrington was 60, but looked older. A heavy man, once powerful, now running to seed. His evening clothes strained at the waistcoat. The scarlet cummerbund resembled a tourniquet. His face was florid, the nose mapped with broken veins, but the eyes were sharp, predatory. Monsieur Poirot. The voice was a rumble of empire and public school. "Sit, drink, you'll need both before the night is out." Poirot bowed and took the indicated chair. leather cracked, horsehair escaping like straw from a scarecrow. Graves poured sherry from a decanter the colour of garnets. The butler's hand did not tremble, yet Poirot noted the faintest tremor in the pulse at his temple. Lord Harrington raised his glass, to old friends and new enemies. They drank. The sherry was fine, but carried a faint bitterness at the finish. Almonds, perhaps, or something less benign. Poirot set the glass aside after a single sip. "You honour me with your hospitality, my lord." "Harringtons honour no one," the peer growled. "We endure. This house has stood since Elizabeth sent her sea dogs to plunder Spain. It will stand long after we're bones." He leaned forward. Breath sour. "But bones have a way of refusing to stay buried. You understand bones, Poirot?" "I understand that skeletons locked in cupboards acquire a most unpleasant odour." Harrington barked a laugh that ended in a cough. He pressed a handkerchief to his lips. When it came away, Poirot saw a speck of crimson. "Tomorrow," Harrington said, recovering, "I announce a new will. My solicitor arrives from York. There will be adjustments. My loving family will not be pleased." His gaze slid to the door where shadows of listeners might lurk. "I trust your discretion, Poirot, and your talent for keeping the jackals at bay." Before Poirot could reply, the lights flickered. For 3 heartbeats the library plunged into darkness. When the bulbs steadied, Lord Harrington's face had gone the colour of tallow. "Damn the wiring," he muttered. "Graves!" The butler was already at the door. "I'll see to it, my lord." Poirot rose. "Perhaps a breath of air before dinner." Harrington waved a dismissive hand. "Go, but mark me, tonight the past comes knocking. Let it in at your peril." In the corridor, the gas jets had been lit. Flames trembled in glass chimneys like trapped souls. Poirot moved slowly, cataloguing a portrait of a woman in riding habit, her eyes slashed by a knife. A tapestry worked with the family motto, Semper Paratus, always prepared, frayed at the edges. A door set flush with the panelling, its lock bright with recent oil. He paused at the foot of a narrow staircase spiralling upward. A chain barred the way, but the padlock hung open. From above drifted the scent of jasmine, stronger now, and beneath it the copper tang of blood. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane. Somewhere in the house a clock began to chime 8, each note falling like a coffin nail. He glanced back. The corridor was empty, yet he felt watched by 100 painted eyes. He stepped over the chain. The staircase was stone, worn into hollows by generations of feet. 20 steps, 30, a landing, a door. The handle turned beneath his palm. The room beyond was round, the West Tower chamber Clara had almost named. Moonlight speared through a single arrow slit, silvering dust motes that drifted like ash. In the centre stood a cradle, yew-wood, black with age. Above it hung a mobile of tiny bones, bird bones perhaps, or something smaller. They turned in a draught Poirot could not feel, tinkling softly. On the floor lay a woman's glove, kid leather the colour of old ivory. A dark stain had soaked into the palm, still wet. Poirot knelt, touched the stain with a fingertip, and brought it to his nose. Iron, blood fresh. From the cradle came a sound, soft, rhythmic, breathing. He straightened slowly. The mobile spun faster, bones clacking. Somewhere below, the dinner gong boomed, reverberating through stone and sinew. Poirot closed the door behind him, descended the spiral, and stepped over the chain as though it had never been breached. In the hall, Lady Evelyn waited, her face pale as the glove he had left above. "Dinner is served," she said. Poirot offered his arm. "After you, madame. I find I'm suddenly ravenous. For answers?" As they processed toward the dining room, the fog outside pressed closer, until the windows showed only their own reflections, a tableau of elegant diners moving toward a table set for betrayal. Above them, unnoticed, a single drop of blood slid down the wyvern's broken sword and fell, plink, into the silence. The game, as Poirot had predicted, had begun. Chapter 2. Whispers at Dinner. The dining room of Harrington Manor was a cathedral of mahogany and malice. A single chandelier, Waterford crystal, 24 candles guttering in their sconces, flung splinters of light across the table. The cloth was damask so old it had the sheen of moonlit water. The silver eperches were black with tarnish no polishing could erase. 12 chairs, only 5 occupied. The rest stood like empty confessionals. Poirot entered last, ushered by Graves, whose tread made no sound on the parquet. Lord Harrington already sat at the head, a decanter of claret at his elbow, the colour of arterial blood. He had changed into white tie. The starched front bulged like a sail in high wind. His eyes, small and bright as a boar's, fixed on Poirot. "Sit, sit. We dispense with ceremony tonight." He indicated the chair to his right. "Evelyn, pour for our guest." Lady Evelyn obeyed. The claret gurgled thickly, catching the candlelight. She had changed too. Burgundy silk, the bodice cut perilously low, a diamond brooch shaped like a spider pinning the lace at her throat. When she leaned forward, the stones flashed cold fire. Arthur lounged opposite, a cigarette smouldering between his fingers. He wore his dinner jacket unbuttoned, the black tie already loosened. "To absent friends," he said, raising a glass of whisky instead of wine. "May they stay absent?" Clara hovered at the sideboard, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles blanched. She wore the regulation black alpaca, but a single jet brooch, a morning gift, glinted at her collar. Her gaze kept sliding to the 5th chair, the one no one had mentioned. Lord Harrington carved the saddle of mutton himself, the knife flashing. Grease spattered the cloth. "Eat, Poirot. English beef, English blood, none of your continental fripperies." Poirot inclined his head. "I am, my lord, a citizen of the stomach." He tasted the claret. Excellent, but with a faint almond back note that prickled his tongue. He set the glass aside. Conversation began like a duel. "Tell me, monsieur," Evelyn said, voice light, "do you believe a house can be haunted by the living?" "Mais oui, madame. The living leave stains far harder to scour than any spectre." Arthur laughed, too loudly. "Then this house is a charnel. Father's ancestors hanged poachers from the great oak. One still swings there on windy nights." "Nonsense," Harrington growled. "Superstition for the tenantry. Graves, the Burgundy." The butler circled the table, decanter in hand. Poirot watched the man's reflection in the polished silver salver. A study in suppressed fury. 32 years of bowing, of swallowing insults with the port. The pulse in Graves's temple beat visibly now. Clara served the peas. When she leaned across Arthur, her sleeve brushed his cuff. He flinched as though burned. "Careful, girl," he snapped. "You'll have us wearing the vegetables." Her apology was a whisper. As she straightened, her gaze met Poirot's. For an instant the mask slipped. Terror, pleading, something fiercer. Then the lashes fell. Lord Harrington drained his glass and held it out for refilling. "Tomorrow the solicitor comes. New will. Time to prune the family tree." He glared at Arthur. "Some branches rot." Arthur's smile was a blade. "Prune away, father. Just remember, dead wood burns." Evelyn's hand trembled. A drop of wine fell like a ruby on the cloth. "Reginald, must we discuss business at table?" Business is the only honest thing left in this house. Harrington's voice rose. Debts, adultery, bastard. The word cracked like a whip. Clara dropped the sauce boat. Brown gravy flooded across the damask, soaking toward Poirot's plate. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Graves was there, cloth in hand, murmuring apologies. Harrington waved him away. Leave it. Let it stain, like everything else. Poirot dabbed his lips. My lord, a question. This fifth chair, who is expected? Silence fell, thick as the fog outside. Evelyn's spider brooch rose and fell. Arthur stubbed his cigarette in the butter. Harrington's eyes narrowed. No one. A mistake. Graves, remove it. The butler lifted the chair. As he turned, Poirot saw the seat cushion bore a faint imprint, recent, the hollow still warm. Someone had sat there minutes ago. Lightning flickered beyond the windows. Thunder followed like a judge's gavel. The candles guttered. In that instant, Poirot caught a reflection in the black glass. A woman standing behind Clara, pale hand on the maid's shoulder. When he turned, the space was empty. Harrington pushed back his chair. Port in the library. Poirot, you'll join me. Arthur rose too quickly, swaying. I'll fetch my own brandy. He lurched toward the door. Evelyn remained seated, fingers clenched around her glass. Clara, clear. The maid began stacking plates. Her hands shook so violently the knives chimed. Poirot leaned close as he passed. Courage, mademoiselle. The truth is a lantern. It burns those who fear it. She met his eyes, tears brimming. It's not fear, sir. It's knowing. In the corridor, the gas jets hissed. Arthur had vanished. Graves stood beneath a portrait, polishing an already spotless candlestick. Poirot paused. Tell me, Graves, who sat in the fifth chair? The butler's cloth stilled. No one, sir. Yet the cushion is warm. A muscle jumped in the man's cheek. A trick of the fire, perhaps. Or of a ghost who bleeds. Poirot touched the glove in his pocket, the one from the tower. Blood does not lie. Graves's gaze flicked to the staircase. Some truths are buried for a reason, monsieur. From the library came the crash of glass. Harrington's roar, Damn you, boy! Poirot moved swiftly. The library door stood ajar. Inside, Arthur knelt amid shards of a decanter, whiskey soaking the rug. Lord Harrington loomed over him, face purple. You'll get not one penny, not one! Arthur looked up, eyes wild. Then I'll take what's mine tonight. He lunged. Harrington swung the heavy decanter base. It caught Arthur on the temple. The young man crumpled. Evelyn's scream echoed from the hall. She flew past Poirot, dropping beside her son. Reginald, you've killed him! Harrington stared at the body, chest heaving. Good riddance! Poirot knelt, fingers at Arthur's throat. Pulse strong, a goose egg rising. He lives, madame, but the night is young. He straightened, meeting Harrington's gaze. My lord, you spoke of pruning. It seems the tree prunes itself. Lightning again, closer. In its glare, Poirot saw the portrait above the mantel move, a trick of shadow, or had the eyes shifted? Graves appeared, impassive. Shall I fetch brandy, my lord? Harrington laughed, a terrible sound. Brandy! Fetch arsenic. We'll toast the new will properly. He seized a fresh decanter from the tantalus, poured a tumbler, and raised it high. To the Harringtons, may we all die rich. He drank deeply. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering. Harrington clutched his throat, eyes bulging. A strangled gasp. Then he toppled, crashing across the desk, scattering papers like white ravens. Evelyn screamed once, a sound torn from the roots of her soul. Arthur stirred, groaning. Graves stood frozen, decanter still in hand. Poirot alone moved. He knelt beside the fallen man, sniffed the tumbler's rim. Bitter almonds, unmistakable. Mon Dieu, the pruning is complete. He looked up. 4 faces ringed him. Evelyn, chalk white. Arthur, blood trickling from his temple. Clara, trembling in the doorway. Graves, the decanter now empty at his feet. Outside, the storm broke. Rain lashed the windows like thrown gravel. Somewhere in the house, a clock began to strike 9. Slow, deliberate, as though counting heartbeats. Poirot rose. His voice cut through the thunder. Lock the doors! No one leaves this room. The game, mes amis, has moved to its endgame. And in the silence that followed, the chandelier candles one by one guttered out, plunging the manor into darkness thick enough to drown in. Chapter 3. The Shadow of Suspicion. Darkness swallowed the dining room like ink poured into water. Only the fire remained, a sullen red eye in the grate. Poirot's voice floated above the breathing of 5 frightened people. Graves, matches, vite, a rasp, a flare. Candle by candle, the butler coaxed the chandelier back to life. Each flame revealed a new tableau. Lord Harrington sprawled across the desk, one arm dangling, fingers brushing the carpet as though reaching for the spilled brandy. Evelyn on her knees, pearls scattered like hailstones. Arthur half risen, blood threading down his cheek. Clara pressed to the wall, apron twisted between her fists. Graves, rigid, the empty decanter still cradled in his arm like a child. Poirot knelt again beside the corpse. The pupils were pinpricks, the lips already blue. He lifted the tumbler, sniffed, touched a finger to the residue, and tasted the faintest trace. Prussic acid. Rapid, elegant, cruel. He looked up. Someone in this room replaced the brandy with death. Arthur laughed, a cracked sound. Father drank enough to float a battleship. Perhaps his heart simply? Non. Poirot lifted the decanter Graves had used. A faint, oily film clung to the inside. Hydrocyanic acid, diluted in alcohol to mask the taste. A chemist's murder. Evelyn's sob tore the air. Reginald hated brandy. He only drank it tonight because she stopped hand to mouth. Because you persuaded him, Arthur finished. His eyes glittered. I heard you in the corridor. Darling, 1 glass to steady the nerves. Silence! Poirot's command cracked like a whip. Accusation without proof is the murderer's first ally. He rose, brushing lint from his knees. Graves, telephone the village. Constable Hale must come at once. Then lock every outer door and bring me the keys. The butler hesitated. The telephone wires are down, sir. The storm. Of course they are. Poirot's smile was wintry. Then we are marooned with our killer. Excellent. He turned to the others. No one leaves this wing. Clara, fetch blankets. Madame, compose yourself. Monsieur Arthur, sit before you fall. We begin. He moved with the neat precision of a watchmaker. First the body, pockets turned out, wallet, cigar case, a gold hunter watch stopped at 8:57. Second, the decanter, crystal, cut glass stopper, no fingerprints but a smear of fresh blood on the base. Third, the desk, scattered papers, a half-written letter in Harrington's spidery cake. Hand. Poirot read aloud. To my solicitor, upon my death, the estate passes in its entirety to the Harrington Benevolent Trust. My wife receives the dower house and a modest annuity. My son, nothing. Let him learn the value of a shilling, as I did. Arthur lunged, but Poirot stepped aside. The young man crashed into a chair. Nothing! Arthur's voice broke. After 20 years of grovelling, 20 years of gaming debts, Evelyn said coldly. Monte Carlo, Deauville, that actress in Shaftesbury Avenue. Enough. Poirot held up a hand. Motive is not proof, yet. He crossed to the sideboard where 5 brandy glasses stood in a neat row. 4 untouched, 1 Harrington's, shattered on the rug. He lifted another, sniffed, touched the rim to his tongue. Clean. He moved to the next. Clean. The third made him pause. A faint almond trace, almost imperceptible. He held it to the candle. Someone tasted death and chose life. Clara returned with blankets, eyes wide. Poirot beckoned her close. "Mademoiselle, you poured the brandy." She nodded, trembling. "His lordship asked for the 98. I fetched it from the cellar myself. And the stopper? I opened it fresh. Mr. Graves watched." Graves inclined his head. "True, sir. I uncorked it myself." Poirot's gaze flicked between them. Then the poison was added after the bottle left the cellar. Someone in this room had 3 minutes while we argued over the will. He opened the French windows. Rain slashed in, soaking the carpet. On the terrace, footprints, small, a woman's shoe, led to the balustrade and vanished. The stone was wet, the prints already fading. "Someone stepped outside to breathe," he murmured, "or to dispose of a vial." Arthur snorted. "In this deluge? You'll catch your death, Poirot. Better a cold than a noose." Poirot closed the windows and faced them. "We will search. Every pocket, every drawer, every heartbeat. But first, alibis." He began with Evelyn. "I was beside Reginald every second." "Except when you left to powder your nose," Arthur said. "I was gone 30 seconds. "Long enough." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Monsieur Arthur." "I was on the floor, unconscious. Ask father." He gestured bitterly at the corpse. "Graves?" "Pouring, sir. Then fetching sal volatile for her ladyship." "Clara?" The maid's voice was a thread. "Clearing the gravy. Then I went to the pantry for fresh napkins." "Alone?" She nodded. Poirot's eyes narrowed. 4 people, 4 shadows, 1 murderer, and the clock stopped at 8:57 tells us the exact moment the poison struck. He knelt again, gently prying open Harrington's rigid fingers. A scrap of paper, crumpled ink blurred by sweat. Poirot smoothed it. A single line, scrawled in haste. "Tower, midnight, come alone or she dies." He looked up. Someone lured him to the West Tower, earlier today. The meeting never took place, because the lure became the trap. Evelyn gasped. "The tower is locked." "Yet I found it open not 2 hours ago." Poirot's voice was soft steel, and a glove stained with fresh blood. Clara swayed. Graves caught her elbow. "Steady, girl." Poirot watched them. "Graves, you knew the tower was forbidden, yet the padlock hung loose. Why?" The butler's face was stone. "I oil all locks monthly, sir. Habit. Or preparation." Thunder crashed directly overhead. The chandelier swung. Shadows danced like hanged men. Poirot pocketed the note. "We adjourn to the drawing-room. Graves, bring the decanter and every glass. We will taste innocence together." Arthur laughed wildly. "You'll poison us all." "Only the guilty need fear." They moved in procession, candlelight flickering over frightened faces. In the hall, the grandfather clock struck 10, its chime flat and tuneless. Poirot paused beneath the Wyvern portrait. The painted eyes seemed to follow him. Halfway up the staircase, a scream, "High animal!" ripped the air. "Clara's!" She pointed upward. On the landing, moonlight spilled through a broken pane. Something dangled from the balustrade. A woman's scarf, silk, the colour of dried blood, knotted like a noose. Evelyn ran forward. "That's mine! I lost it yesterday!" Poirot caught her wrist. "Do not touch. Observe." The scarf was tied with a running loop, the kind used by hangmen. At its end, weighted by a silver clothes brush, it had swung gently until the wind stilled. Arthur whispered, "Someone meant to frighten us." "Or to rehearse," Poirot said. He climbed the stairs, untied the scarf, examined the knot. Sailor's work. Graves had served in the Navy before buttoned cuffs and silver trays. The butler met his gaze steadily. "I was below stairs, sir." "Yes, knots do not tie themselves." Poirot coiled the scarf. "We are mice in a very clever cat's game, but cats forget. Mice have teeth." He led them downward. In the drawing room, he arranged 5 chairs in a semicircle, placed the poison decanter on a table like a chalice. "Sit." They obeyed. Rain hammered the windows, the fire spat. Poirot poured a thimbleful of brandy into each glass, then a single drop from the tainted decanter into the 5th. He lifted it. "The murderer knows which glass holds death. The innocent do not. We drink together, on the count of 3. Evelyn whimpered. Arthur's hand shook. Clara closed her eyes. Graves stood behind her chair, expressionless. Poirot counted. "Un." Glasses rose. "Deux." Arthur's knuckles whitened. "Trois." Arthur dashed his glass into the fire. Flames roared blue, then died. "Devil take you, Poirot." The others drank. Water. Poirot had palmed the poison drop. He smiled gently. "Fear is a confession, monsieur, but not yet proof." He turned to Graves. "Bring rope. We bind the doors from within. Tonight no one sleeps alone." As the butler left, Poirot leaned close to Clara. "The tower, mademoiselle. Midnight. You will take me there." Her whisper was scarcely breath. "He'll kill us both." "Then we must kill him first, with truth." Outside, something heavy thudded against the front door. Once, twice, the knocker, or a fist. Poirot's eyes gleamed in the candlelight. "Our murderer grows impatient. Let him knock. Hercule Poirot is home." Chapter 4. Clues in the Library. The library door shut with the soft finality of a coffin lid. Poirot turned the key twice, pocketed it, and faced the room. Moonlight, thin and surgical, slid between the velvet curtains and laid silver bars across the Turkey rug. The storm had passed. Only a steady drip from the eaves marked its retreat. Somewhere a shutter banged like a slow heartbeat. 4 people watched him. Evelyn, wrapped in a man's dressing gown 3 sizes too large, pearls replaced by a bruise at her throat. Arthur, temples swollen purple, eyes glittering with brandy and fury. Clara, apron discarded, a child's nightgown beneath her cloak, bare feet blue with cold. Graves, still in evening black, the rope coiled over his arm like a sleeping adder. Poirot set the rope on the desk beside the poisoned decanter. "Tonight the house is a locked box," he said. "We are the jewels inside. One of us is paste." He moved to the fireplace and pressed a panel. A section of bookcase swung inward, revealing a narrow stair spiralling downward. "The priest's hole," he explained. "Lord Harrington showed me this afternoon. Bragged that Cromwell's men never found it. Tonight it will hide something more modern. The truth." Arthur snorted. "Going to wall us up, Poirot." "Only the guilty need fear bricks." Poirot closed the panel. "First, we catalogue." He began with the desk. Papers lay where Harrington had scattered them. The draft will, a ledger of debts, a photograph of a young woman in Edwardian dress, eyes slashed with a penknife. Poirot lifted the photograph to the candle. "Clara, this is your mother?" The maid nodded, tears sudden. She was lady's maid to the old lord. He promised marriage. When she quickened, he paid her passage to Canada. She died in the crossing. Graves's jaw tightened. "Old sins, sir. Old sins fertilize new murders." Poirot set the photograph aside. Next. He opened the top drawer. Inside lay a small Morocco case. He snapped it open. A hypodermic syringe, glass ampules labelled in Latin. "Potassium cyanide," he read. "Enough to kill a regiment." He looked at Graves. "The cellar key, if you please." The butler produced a heavy iron key. Poirot weighed it. You fetched the 98 brandy at 8:15. You were alone in the cellar 3 minutes. Ample time to draw poison into a fountain pen filler and return upstairs. Graves met his gaze. I opened the bottle in front of Clara, after you had already tampered with the decanter on the sideboard. Poirot's voice was silk over steel. You knew his lordship would demand brandy after the quarrel. Evelyn stirred. Graves has served faithfully for— Faithful service breeds resentment, madame. A lifetime of yes, my lord, curdles into no, my lord, never again. Arthur laughed harshly. Listen to the little Belgian. Next he'll accuse the suits of armour. Poirot ignored him. He crossed to the French windows, drew back the curtain. The terrace glistened, footprints had filled with rain. But something else caught the moonlight. A single white feather caught in the rosemary bush. He opened the window. Cold air swept in, carrying the scent of wet earth and something acrid gun oil. Curious, he murmured, plucking the feather. A pigeon feather, yet no pigeons roost here. Someone released a message bird tonight. Arthur paled. You're inventing ghosts. Ghosts leave no footprints. Poirot pointed to the balustrade. A scrape of fresh mud, heel-shaped. Size 7, narrow, Clara's shoe. The maid gasped. You went to the pantry, you said. Yet the pantry is east. These prints lead west, toward the gunroom. Clara's hands flew to her mouth. I only meant to warn him. Warn whom? She began to cry. Graves stepped forward, rope uncoiling. Enough, sir. You'll break her. Poirot rounded on the butler. You protected her once, perhaps. When the old lord cast her mother aside, you promised the child a future. Then the new lord threatened to sell the estate, your home, your kingdom. Together you planned a different future. Graves's face was marble. You weave fairy tales. Do I? Poirot produced the blood-stained glove from his pocket. Kid leather, left hand, monogram CW, found in the tower beside a cradle that has not cradled a child in 20 years. Your cradle, Clara. The one your mother rocked before she was sent away. Clara sank to the rug, sobbing. Evelyn knelt, arms around her. Stop! She's only a girl. Girls grow claws when heritage is stolen. Poirot's voice softened. But girls do not buy potassium cyanide from London chemists. That requires a gentleman's cheque-book. He turned to Arthur. Your cheque stubs, monsieur. The ledger shows 3 drawn to cash, 50, in the last fortnight. Enough for a fatal purchase. Arthur's smile was wolfish. Father kept me penniless. I borrowed. From whom? Friends. Friends who supply poison? Poirot opened the ledger to a marked page. Here, initials G.R. Graves, Reginald, or Graves the butler, lending to the heir. Graves lunged. Arthur sidestepped. The rope lashed out, catching the young man across the knees. He fell heavily. Order! Poirot's shout froze them. We are not savages! He knelt, bound Arthur's wrists with his own handkerchief. You will sit quietly, monsieur, until Scotland Yard arrives. If the wires are down, the carrier pigeons will fly at dawn. He helped Clara to a chair, offered his pocket handkerchief. She took it with shaking fingers. Now, he said gently, the tower. You will show me what you hid there. She led the way, candle trembling. The others followed in silence. Up the grand staircase, past the dangling scarf, now still, along a corridor smelling of damp stone. The tower door stood ajar. The padlock hung open like a broken jaw. Inside, moonlight poured through the arrow slit, silvering the cradle. The bone mobile turned slowly, though no wind stirred. On the floorboards lay a child's shoe, white leather, one button missing. Clara whispered, "Mamma kept it, said it would bring me luck." Poirot lifted the shoe. Beneath it, a loose plank. He prized it up, a small tin box, rusted, the lid painted with faded roses. Inside, a locket, a lock of dark hair, a folded letter. He read aloud, "My darling Clara, if you read this, I failed you. The poison is for him alone. Use it only if he threatens to take the house. Burn this after. Your loving G." Clara stared at Graves. "You wrote this?" The butler's shoulders sagged. "I forged his lordship's hand, thought to spare you the deed." Evelyn's voice was ice. "So you planned murder together?" "No, madame." Graves met her gaze. "I planned justice. He ruined my sister. Clara's mother promised marriage, then paid her passage to vanish. She died of fever in steerage. I waited 30 years. Arthur strained against his bonds. "And I was to hang for it?" "You were to inherit nothing," Graves said simply. "The will was already signed. I merely hastened the inevitable." Poirot closed the tin. "But you made one error, mon ami. You used prussic acid, traceable to the gunroom, where you cleaned the colonel's pistols. And you left the empty ampule in the rosebed, wrapped in a page torn from the estate accounts. Your initials, Graves, in the corner." He produced the sodden paper from his waistcoat. Ink had run, but GR was legible. Graves smiled. "Tired, almost relieved. Then it is finished." "Not yet." Poirot turned to Clara. "You released the pigeon?" She nodded. "To Dr. Mallory in the village, begging help. Help arrived too late." Poirot looked at each in turn. But truth did not. He opened the tower window. Far below, dawn bled pale gold across the fog. A motor engine growled on the gravel. Inspector Hale at last. Poirot faced them. "The box, the letter, the ampule. Scotland Yard will have their chain, but I prefer links of logic." He lifted the child's shoe. "This belonged to a daughter denied. Tonight, a father paid the reckoning." Graves extended his wrists. "Bind me, sir. I am ready." Poirot shook his head. "Justice binds itself. You will walk downstairs on your own feet as you served for 30 years. As they descended, the bone mobile gave one last chime and was still. Sunlight touched the cradle, warming wood that had known only shadows. Behind them, the tower door swung shut. The padlock clicked home, forever. Chapter 5. Interrogations by Firelight. The drawing-room fire had sunk to a sullen heart of ruby coals. 4 chairs faced the hearth like a tribunal. A 5th, empty, waited for the accused. Poirot stood with his back to the flames, coat unbuttoned, hands clasped behind him. The storm had rolled inland. Only the wind prowled the chimneys now, moaning like a mourner kept outside the church. Inspector Hale, red-faced, moustache bristling, boots still dripping from the drive, had taken the confession, the tin box, the ampule, and the rope. He had also taken Graves. The butler had walked between 2 constables without a word, spine straight, eyes fixed on the sunrise as though it were a parade ground he had once known. Yet the house refused to exhale. Something still moved in the rafters. Poirot broke the silence. "Mesdames, messieurs, the butler has confessed to the intent. He has not confessed to the act. One loose thread remains." Arthur, wrists raw from the handkerchief, spat into the fire. "Graves poisoned the brandy. Case closed. Let us go to bed." "No." Poirot lifted the decanter Hale had sealed in brown paper. This contained enough cyanide to fell an elephant, yet his lordship died of a single mouthful. A careful murderer would measure. A panicked one would pour. Who panicked? Evelyn sat very still, the spider brooch now pinned to a dressing gown of black velvet. "You torment us for sport." "I torment murder, madame. It is a jealous mistress." Clara, given brandy for shock, clutched the glass in both hands. I never touched the decanter after Mr. Graves opened it. Poirot's eyes softened. Truth, child, you touched something else. He crossed to the mantel and lifted the small silver tray that had held the 5 brandy glasses. One glass was missing, smashed in the library. He turned the tray to the firelight. A faint circle of moisture remained where a 6th glass had stood. Someone drank before dinner, he said. Someone who knew the taste of almonds and lived. Arthur's laugh was brittle. Father's private stock. He often took a nip to steady the hand before carving. Yet the stopper was replaced so neatly that Graves never noticed an extra measure gone. Poirot set the tray down. Who entered the library between 7:30 and 8? Evelyn's voice was a thread. I did. To leave Reginald's spectacles. He had mislaid them. Alone? She hesitated. Arthur was with me. Arthur's head snapped round. I was in the gun room. Were you? Poirot produced a tiny brass key. This opens the gun room door. I found it in your dinner jacket, mon ami, along with a cartridge case, empty. Arthur lunged. Poirot stepped aside. The young man crashed into the coal scuttle, sending black dust across the rug. Enough! Inspector Hale's bulk filled the doorway. I've a man at the gate and 2 more around the house. Sit down, Mr. Harrington, or sit in irons. Arthur subsided, panting. Poirot continued, calm as snowfall. He paced, cane tapping. 60 seconds, 1 thimble of poison, 1 life, Clara whispered. I saw I mean her ladyship, open the tantalus. Evelyn's eyes blazed. Lies! Truth, Poirot corrected gently. You opened the wrong decanter, madame, the one already laced by another hand. You tasted, detected the almond, and poured the contents into the fire. That is why the library smelled of cyanide when I entered. He produced a singed cork from his pocket. Found in the grate. Your fingerprint, madame, in face powder. Evelyn's hand flew to her cheek. I feared for Reginald. Someone had threatened him. Someone had. Poirot turned to Arthur. You wrote the Tower note. You lured him there at 6, hoping to force a new will. He refused. You struck him, here. He touched his own temple. The bruise beneath the hairline. Then you panicked, fled, and later tried to frame Graves by planting the ampule. Arthur's defiance cracked. He was cutting me off. Everything, house, lands, the Yorkshire shoot, gone to a charity for fallen women. The ultimate joke. So you chose murder as punchline. Clara stood, small fists clenched. You used me. You said if I carried the note, Father would acknowledge me at last. Arthur sneered. Father acknowledged no one. Poirot raised a hand. Silence. We reconstruct. He mimed Arthur's movements. Pocket decanter. Slip downstairs, draw poison with a fountain pen filler stolen from the gun room. Return. Pour a measure into the spare glass. Taste. Recoil. Empty glass into fire. Replace cork. Flee. 30 seconds, Poirot said. Lady Evelyn entered next, found the tainted glass, and in maternal terror destroyed the evidence. Graves, returning, saw nothing amiss. Clara, loyal to her protector, said nothing. He turned to Evelyn. You saved your son from drinking his own poison, by accident. Then you saved him again by burning the glass. Evelyn's voice was ash. I thought Graves had done it. I wanted to shield Arthur from scandal. Arthur buried his face in his hands. Poirot's tone softened. Madam, maternal love is a locked room. Sometimes the key turns the wrong way. He faced Clara. And you, ma petite, carried messages between butler and heir, believing you served justice. Instead you served chaos. Clara sank to her knees. I only wanted a name. Inspector Hale cleared his throat. Charges, monsieur? Arthur Harrington, murder. Lady Evelyn, concealment of a felony. Clara Wren, accessory before the fact. Arthur looked up, eyes hollow. "And Graves?" "Graves," Poirot said, "will be charged with conspiracy and attempted murder. But the hand that poured was yours, monsieur. The heart that stopped was your father's." He opened the drawing-room doors. Dawn flooded the hall, gilding the Wyvern portrait until the broken sword seemed to drip light instead of blood. Poirot addressed the house itself. "Your ghosts are evicted, Harrington Manor. Sleep." He offered Evelyn his arm. She took it, trembling. As they crossed the threshold, Clara whispered, "Will they hang him?" Poirot's answer was almost tender. "They will hang the crime child. The man they will cage. There is mercy in that." Behind them the fire settled into grey ash. The empty fifth chair waited, patient as justice, for the next act. Chapter 6. The Garden's Secret. The sun rose thin and cold, the colour of watered blood. Harrington Manor stood stripped of night, its stones the dull grey of old bones. Every window stared east, as if the house itself were watching the police van crawl down the lime avenue with Arthur handcuffed in the back. Lady Evelyn had been allowed to follow in the second car. Veiled, upright, already practicing the silence she would keep for the rest of her life. Clara remained behind, under the eye of a police matron, until the magistrates decided what to do with a girl who had wanted only a surname. Poirot refused the offer of breakfast. He wanted the garden while the dew still held footprints. Inspector Hale, yawning, stamped beside him in gumboots 2 sizes too large. "Coroner's wagon will be here by 10, he said. "Inquest tomorrow. You've given us chapter and verse, monsieur, but the chief constable likes his evidence gift-wrapped." "Then we shall tie a bow," Poirot replied. They followed the terrace to the rose garden. The storm had beaten the blooms to rags. Petals lay like flesh wounds on the gravel. At the far end, where the yew hedge formed a dark wall, a patch of earth had been disturbed. A single rosemary bush leaned drunkenly, roots half exposed. Poirot knelt. "Observe, Inspector. The soil is looser here than elsewhere. Someone dug in haste." Hale produced a gardener's trowel. 3 strokes revealed a twist of oilcloth. Inside, a brown glass bottle, cork sealed with red wax, the label half scratched away. "Potassium cyanide crystals," Hale read. "Army Medical Stores, 1917. Graves's war souvenir," Poirot murmured. "He told Clara it was rat poison. Children believe what protects them." He stood, brushing dirt from his knees. "But this is the second bottle. The first, liquid, went into the brandy. Why bury the spare?" A constable called from the potting shed. "Sir, door's jemmied." Inside, seed trays lay scattered. Earthenware pots smashed. On the workbench, a brass microscope glinted. Victorian, beautiful, useless for anything but show. Beneath it, a scrap of paper pinned by a dibber. Poirot read aloud. "Midnight. Bring the girl, or the house burns. No police. Friend." The handwriting was Arthur's. Spidery, theatrical. Hale whistled. "Blackmail? Amateur theatrics," Poirot corrected. Arthur needed Clara terrified, and Graves desperate. 2 puppets, 1 string. He opened the microscope case. Nested inside the velvet lining lay a fountain pen filler. Glass barrel, rubber bulb collapsed. Traces of oily liquid clung to the nozzle. "Here is the murder weapon," Poirot said softly. Arthur filled this in the gunroom, slipped upstairs while Graves was at the door, and doctored the decanter. 60 seconds as I timed. Then he hid the filler here, intending to retrieve it later. Panic made him careless. Hale bagged the filler. And the buried bottle? Graves's insurance. If Arthur failed, the butler would finish the task himself. 2 plans, same poison, same night. Mon Dieu, what a duet! They moved on. Beyond the shed, a gravel path led to the old ice house, domed brick, half sunk, its iron door green with verdigris. The padlock hung open. Poirot lifted the lantern Hale had brought. Inside, the air was black and breath-cold. Frost feathers starred the walls. On the sawdust floor lay a single white kid glove, the mate to the one Poirot had found in the tower. A dark stain had dried to rust across the palm. Hale swore under his breath. "Whose blood?" "Lord Harrington's," Poirot said. "From the blow Arthur struck at 6 o'clock. The glove was Clara's. She dropped it when she fled the tower after delivering the forged note. Arthur retrieved it, brought it here to confuse us. Another loose thread." He lifted the glove with tweezers. Beneath it, something glinted. A tiny gold crest pin shaped like the Harrington wyvern. Poirot turned it to the light. "Lady Evelyn's. She wore its twin last night. She followed Arthur here, saw the glove, understood her son had struck the first blow. Maternal love again, silencing evidence." Hale shook his head. "Family, eh?" "Family," Poirot echoed, "is the oldest poison of all." They emerged, blinking into daylight. Across the lawn, the village carpenter was measuring Lord Harrington for a plain deal coffin. The sound of sawing carried on the wind. Poirot paused at the sundial in the rose garden. Its gnomon was twisted, bent by a bullet years ago, legend said, when a poacher took aim at the lord and missed. The motto carved around the dial read, "Horas non numero nisi serenas," I count only the serene hours. Poirot traced the letters. "Today," he said, "we count the hours of storm." A sudden cooing overhead. A pigeon, white, one leg ringed in brass, landed on the yew hedge, head cocked. Hale reached for his whistle. Poirot stayed his hand. "Let it go." It carried Clara's cry for help to Dr. Mallory. Messengers deserve freedom. The bird launched skyward, vanishing into the pale sun. They walked on. At the garden's edge stood the old greenhouse, panes filmed with soot. Inside, tomato. Plants had run wild, fruit split and rotting. On the staging bench lay a child's slate, chalked words already smudged by damp. "I want my name." Poirot's heart contracted. "Clara's classroom," he said. Graves taught her letters here when the governess was dismissed. Every evening after supper. He gave her pride, then asked her to trade it for murder. He erased the words with his glove. Chalk dust drifted like ash. Hale cleared his throat. "Anything else, monsieur?" "One last grave." They followed a brick path to the pet cemetery, miniature headstones for spaniels and parrots. At the newest mound, fresh turf had been laid. A wooden marker read, "Flossie, best of rats, 1924-1925. Poirot knelt, pressed the turf. It lifted easily. Beneath, wrapped in a silk handkerchief, lay a small pearl-handled revolver, 6 chambers, 1 fired. "Arthur's," Poirot said. "He meant to shoot his father in the tower, lost his nerve, struck instead. Later he buried the gun here. Childish symbolism, killing the rat in the family." Hale wrapped the revolver. "That's the lot, then." "No." Poirot stood, eyes on the manor. "One secret still breathes." He led the way back through the scullery, up the servants' stair, along the west corridor to the tower door. The padlock gleamed, newly fitted by the constable on guard. Poirot dismissed the man with a nod. Inside the tower room, sunlight now flooded the cradle. The bone mobile hung motionless. Poirot crossed to the arrow-slit window and looked down. Directly below, 30 feet of sheer drop to the old moat, now a lily pond choked with weed. He opened the casement. Wind bellied the curtains. "Observe the angle," he said. "From here one could lower a weighted cord to the library terrace. A bottle tied on, hauled up, emptied, lowered again, all without leaving the room." Hale leaned out. "Risky. Youth is reckless." Poirot closed the window. Arthur practiced with the pigeon message. The real cargo was death. He knelt by the cradle, pressed a knot in the U. A panel slid aside, revealing a cavity. Inside, a child's christening robe, yellowed lace, and a silver rattle engraved CW 1904. "Clara's," Poirot whispered. "Her mother hid them here before she was sent away. Graves found them years later, kept them as relics. Tonight, he returned the robe, folded as if laying a baby to rest." Hale was silent a moment. Will the girl hang? Magistrates are sentimental about orphans. Transportation, perhaps. A new continent. A new name. Poirot closed the panel. "Come, the house has yielded all its dead." They descended. In the hall, the grandfather clock prepared to strike 9. Poirot paused beneath the Wyvern portrait. The painted eyes no longer followed. Sunlight had burned away the trick. He laid a gloved hand on the newel post. "Adieu, Harrington Manor. Your serene hours are restored." Outside, the police van had gone. Rooks wheeled above the elms, crying about emptiness. Poirot stepped into the waiting car. As it rolled down the avenue, he saw Clara at an upper window, small face pressed to the glass, one hand raised, not in farewell, but in promise. The car turned onto the high road. In the wing mirror, the manor shrank, spires pricking the sky like needles that had finished their sewing. Poirot closed his eyes. In the darkness behind the lids, he saw the garden again. Rosemary bent, but not broken, the sundial counting forward, the white pigeon climbing toward a sky washed clean. Somewhere, a clock struck 9. The serene hours had begun. Chapter 7. Attic Revelations. The house refused to be quiet. Even with the police gone, the corridors still creaked, the clocks still coughed, and the air carried the faint iron smell of blood that no amount of carbolic could scrub away. Poirot had dismissed Inspector Hale with a courteous bow and a promise of one final formality. Now he stood alone in the entrance hall, gloved hands folded over his cane, listening to the manor breathe. A single thread remained. He felt it tug, upward. The attic stair lay behind a green baize door at the far end of the servants' wing. No one had climbed it since the constables sealed the tower. Poirot slipped the police tape, turned the iron ring, and began the ascent. 47 steps, narrow, worn into hollows by generations of housemaids carrying slops and secrets. At the top, a low door bound with iron. Unlocked, of course. He stepped into the attic. The space stretched the full length of the house, a cathedral of dust and darkness. Sunlight leaked through a single dormer, laying a dusty blade across mountains of discarded life, cracked globes, a child's rocking horse with one eye missing, trunks stenciled with the names of long-dead subalterns. A smell of camphor, mouse droppings, and something sweeter, jasmine dying. Poirot moved forward, cane muffled on the drugget. Halfway along, a circle had been swept clean. In its centre stood a small deal table, an oil lamp freshly trimmed, and 2 chairs facing each other like duelists. Poirot's pulse quickened. Someone had prepared a stage. He lit the lamp. Golden light spilled, revealing footprints in the dust. Small, bare, a woman's, they led to the table, circled it twice, then returned to the dormer. The window stood open 6 inches. A silk cord, fine as fishing line, ran from the sill into the void. Poirot leaned out. The cord dropped 3 stories to the library terrace, weighted by a lead fishing plummet. A message run for pigeons, a murder run for poison. He smiled without humour. Très ingénieux. Behind him, the attic floorboards sighed. He turned. Clara Wren stood in the dormer's shadow, barefoot, clad only in a man's nightshirt, hair loose down her back like a bride of Bedlam. In her right hand, she held the pearl-handled revolver found beneath Flossie's grave. The hammer was back. "Close the door, monsieur," she said. Her voice was steady, almost conversational. "We have unfinished business." Poirot obeyed, slowly. "Ma petite, the police are only 5 minutes away if I shout. They won't hear you." She lifted a police whistle on a red cord. "I borrowed this from the constable's coat while he drank tea. 1 blast and the dogs come, 2 blasts and they tear flesh." She smiled, the same smile she had worn serving peas. "I practiced on rats." Poirot studied her. The child who had chalked "I want my name" was gone. In her place stood a girl who had learned that names could be weapons. He inclined his head. "Alors, we talk. But first, the gun on the table, yes?" Clara considered, then laid the revolver beside the christening cup. "Better. Now we are civilized." She sat. Poirot took the opposite chair. Dust motes danced between them like slow bullets. "Read the letter," she said. He broke the seal. "My dearest daughter, if you read this, I am taken or dead. The poison was never for his lordship alone. It was for the house. Burn it, roof and rafters, and rise from the ashes with the name you were denied. The lamp is full. The cord is cut. Strike the match at moonrise. Your loving uncle, G. Poirot, folded the paper. Graves left you a suicide note and a funeral pyre. He left me justice." Clara's eyes shone fever-bright. "They hanged my mother in all but rope. Canada, fever, a pauper's grave. I will hang this house in fire." She reached beneath the table and produced a tin of Swan Vestas. "1 match, monsieur. The beams are dry as bone. In 10 minutes, Harrington Manor is tinder." Poirot's mind raced catalogue upon catalogue. The oil lamp, full, wick-trimmed. The open dormer, perfect flue. The silk cord, already soaked in paraffin, he smelled it now. A spark, a draught, and the attic would blaze like a matchbox. He kept his voice level. "And you, Clara? Will you burn with it? I have no name to lose." She struck a match. The flame trembled, blue at the heart. "But you, Monsieur Poirot, you have a reputation. Die in a fire set by a maid, and the world will laugh at the little grey cells." She touched the match to the cord. A bead of fire raced downward, vanishing through the dormer. Poirot did not move. "Regard the pigeon feather," he said conversationally. "It is not from the bird you freed at dawn. It is from the pillow in the cradle below. You slept here last night, did you not? Dreaming of names." Clara's hand wavered. "How? Because the dust on your feet is attic dust, not kitchen flour. Because the nightshirt is Graves's, monogram GR on the cuff. Because a girl who wants to burn a house does not leave her only shoes in the ice house." He leaned forward. "You are not an arsonist, Clara. You are a child playing with matches to frighten the adults. Put it down." Tears suddenly spilled. "They took him. They took everything. They took the guilty. You remain." Poirot's voice softened. "Your mother's locket is in my pocket. Inside is a curl of her hair and a note in her own hand. Clara, live, not burn, live." He laid the locket on the table. Gold glinted against scarred wood. Clara stared, match guttering between her fingers. Outside, a church bell began to toll, 9 slow strokes for a soul departed. The sound rolled through the attic like a tide. Poirot spoke into the silence. "Strike that match, and you orphan yourself twice. Graves will hang for murder. You will hang for arson. 2 nooses, 1 cradle empty." He extended his hand, palm up. "Give me the box, ma petite. Give me the girl your mother carried across an ocean." The match burned lower, singeing her fingers. Clara cried out, dropped it. Poirot crushed the flame beneath his shoe. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Clara laid her head on the table and wept, great tearing sobs that shook the rocking horse in the corner. Poirot rose, circled the table, and placed the locket around her neck. "There! A name weighs nothing and everything. Wear it." He lifted the lamp, carried it to the dormer, and poured the oil into the eaves trough. Paraffin hissed on wet slate, harmless. He severed the cord with his penknife. The weight plummeted, splashing into the lily pond below. When he turned back, Clara was on her knees, gathering the scattered matches into a pathetic pile. "I wanted them to remember me," she whispered. "They will," Poirot said, "as the girl who chose mercy." He helped her to her feet. Together they descended the 47 steps. At the bottom, the green baize door stood open, sunlight poured in, warm and English and unforgiving. In the hall waited Dr. Mallory, the village physician, summoned by the pigeon after all. He carried a small portmanteau and a look of infinite patience. Poirot delivered Clara into his care. Shock and exhaustion, warm milk, no newspapers, and a ticket to Montreal under her mother's maiden name. The convent there owes me a favour. The doctor nodded. "And you, monsieur?" "I have a train to London. Murder, like attic dust, clings. One must beat it out in fresh air." He watched the doctor lead Clara away. At the front door she paused, looked back. "Thank you," she mouthed. Poirot raised his hat. "Merci à toi, mademoiselle. You have given me the rarest clue. A heart that chose not to burn." The door closed. The house exhaled, long and slow. Poirot stepped into the waiting car. As it rolled past the rose garden, he saw the bent rosemary bush already lifting its head, new leaves silver against the dark. The sundial caught the sun. Its shadow pointed firmly forward. In the wing mirror, the manor shrank, windows winking like eyes that had finally closed in sleep. Poirot settled back, closed his own eyes, and permitted himself a small, satisfied smile. The attic was swept, the cradle was empty, and somewhere across the Atlantic a girl, with a new name, would learn that justice, like mercy, sometimes wears the face of a stranger with an impeccable moustache. The car turned onto the high road. Behind it, rooks rose from the elms in a black cloud, cawing about endings and beginnings, saying, Poirot did not look back. Chapter 8. The Twist Unfolds. The great hall of Harrington Manor had never looked smaller. Sunlight, thin and merciless, poured through the tall east windows and laid every crack in the marble bare. The Wyvern portrait glared down, its broken sword now catching the light like a warning. Poirot stood at the foot of the staircase, hands clasped behind his back, coat buttoned to the throat despite the warmth. Around him, the last actors waited on their marks. Poirot spoke first, voice soft, lethal. Mesdames, messieurs, the police have their confessions, their bottles, their cords. But Hercule Poirot has one question the magistrates will never ask. Who gained the most from Lord Harrington's death, yet shed not a single tear? He let the silence stretch until the grandfather clock coughed, embarrassed. Arthur will hang for striking the blow. Graves will hang for supplying the poison. Clara will sail for a new continent with a new name. But the estate, who inherits the estate? He turned to Evelyn. Madam, you told us the new will left everything to charity. a lie so fluent it convinced even the solicitor. Yet here he produced a single sheet of heavy cream paper, the Harrington crest embossed in crimson. Is the true will, witnessed yesterday at noon in the York office of Messrs. Bradley and Bradley. Read the dispositive clause aloud, if you please. Evelyn's veil trembled. Her voice, when it came, was a thread of ice. All my real and personal property whatsoever, and wheresoever, after payment of debts and legacies, I devise and bequeath to my wife, Evelyn Margaret Harrington, absolutely, in fee simple, free of all trusts. She stopped. The hall rang with the words. Inspector Hale whistled. That's 250,000 acres, give or take. Precisely, Poirot said. Arthur believed himself disinherited. Graves believed the house would be sold for orphans. Clara believed she would burn it for justice. All of them, pawns. The Queen stood behind the curtain, moving every piece. He stepped closer to Evelyn. You forged the charity draft, madame. You persuaded your husband to sign the real will in the library at 11:30, while Arthur sulked in the gun-room, and Graves trimmed lamps. You promised Reginald that Arthur would be sent to Canada, out of sight, out of scandal. A mother's mercy, you called it. He believed you. He signed. Then you watched him drink the brandy you knew was poisoned. Evelyn's gloved hand rose to the spider brooch. Prove it. Poirot smiled without warmth. Gladly. Exhibit 1. The spectacles you claimed to deliver at 7:50. They were found this morning on the library desk. Lenses smeared. With your face powder. Coty Rose Thay. Unobtainable in England before 1923. You wore it last night. You never left the library. You waited until Graves was called to the door, then doctored the decanter yourself. He produced a second sheet, smaller, singed at one corner. Exhibit 2, the real tower note, written in your hand, not Arthur's, found in the cradle lining. You lured Reginald to the tower at 6, struck him with the christening cup, dents matched the bruise, then dragged him unconscious to the library. Arthur arrived later, saw his father prone, assumed he had done the deed, and fled in panic. You let him believe it. You let everyone believe it. Clara gasped. You used me. Everyone, Poirot repeated gently. Even the pigeon. You released it at dawn with a second message, countermanding Clara's cry for help. Dr. Mallory received 2 notes. The first begged rescue. The second, in your handwriting, dismissed it as a maid's hysterics. He burned the second. I persuaded him to part with the ashes. He opened his palm. Grey flakes drifted to the marble. Evelyn's veil lifted. Her eyes were winter water no longer. They were flint. Reginald beat me for 20 years, she said. He broke Arthur's spirit with every cheque withheld. He buried Clara's mother in an unmarked grave. I simply returned the favour. She reached into her reticule and drew out the mate to the pearl-handled revolver, fully loaded. Hale reached for his whistle. Poirot lifted a finger. Attendes. Evelyn smiled, a terrible free smile. I planned every step, monsieur. The poison was mine, ordered from Vienna under my maiden name. The will is legal, the house is mine, and this, she levelled the revolver at Poirot's heart, is my curtain. Clara stepped forward. You promised me a name. I promised you ashes. Evelyn's voice cracked like a whip. Stay back! Dr. Mallory moved to shield the girl. Hale drew his truncheon. Poirot did not flinch. Madame, he said conversationally, you have forgotten the serene hours. He gestured to the sundial visible through the open door. Its shadow had crept to noon. At 12 o'clock precisely, the York solicitor telephoned Scotland Yard with an interesting codicil. If Lady Evelyn Harrington should die by violence within 1 year of the testator's death, the estate reverts to the Harrington Benevolent Trust after all. Your husband added it at the last moment, Insurance against exactly this moment. He knew you, madame. He knew. Evelyn's hand wavered. Shoot me, Poirot continued, and you hang for murder. Shoot yourself, and the orphans take everything, live, and you keep the house, on condition you open it every Michaelmas to the children your husband despised. His final joke. The revolver barrel dipped. Outside, rooks wheeled and screamed. Evelyn looked at Clara, at the locket, the travelling coat, the ticket to a new world. She looked at the Wyvern portrait, the broken sword now bathed in merciless light. Slowly, deliberately, she reversed the gun and laid it on the marble. I surrender, she said. Her voice was steady, almost amused. Checkmate. Hale snapped cuffs around her wrists. She did not resist. As they led her out, Poirot called softly, Madame, one last clue. She paused on the threshold. The spider brooch, he said. 8 legs, 8 heirs disinherited. You wore it like a signature. Evelyn touched the diamond spider, now pinned to a prison cloak. Spiders weave, she said. Sometimes the web catches the weaver. The door closed. The hall was empty save for dust motes and the smell of gun oil. Clara approached Poirot, eyes wide. Will she hang? Transportation, he replied. Western Australia. A sheep station needs a housekeeper who understands ledgers. She will count acres instead of corpses. He offered his arm. Come, ma petite. Your ship sails on the evening tide. Montreal is cold in winter, but hearts warm quickly there. At the front steps, a taxicab waited, engine ticking. Dr. Mallory handed Clara up, then turned to Poirot. Will you travel with us to the station? Poirot shook his head. I have a train south, London, then Brussels. My little grey cells require croissants and civilized conversation. He watched the cab disappear between the elms. Then he walked alone to the rose garden. The bent rosemary had straightened overnight. New leaves, silver green, caught the sun like tiny mirrors. Poirot snapped a sprig, tucked it into his buttonhole. Rosemary, for remembrance, he murmured, and for those who choose life over ashes. He turned his back on Harrington Manor. The wyvern watched him go, sword still broken, but the eyes, for the first time in a century, looked almost peaceful. Poirot raised his hat to the empty air. Adieu, mes fantômes. The game is finished, the board is swept, and somewhere a girl named Clara Wren is learning that a name is only the beginning. He stepped into the waiting car. The driver closed the door. As the manor dwindled in the mirror, the sundial's shadow moved on. 1 serene hour closer to noon. 8 the sky cracked open at 3 o'clock, just as the York solicitor's motor car crunched to a halt beneath the porte-cochere. Rain lashed the stone wyverns. Lightning printed the manor white on the inside of every eyelid. Poirot waited on the top step, umbrella furled, coat collar turned up, the picture of a man who had never hurried in his life. Inspector Hale bounded out first, oilskins streaming. Wires are down again, roads flooding, thought we'd never make it. Behind him, Mr. Bradley, tall, thin, funereal, unfurled a parchment the colour of old bone. Lady Evelyn signed the surrender of custody at the jail. The codicil stands. The house opens to the orphans on Michaelmas, but, he glanced at the storm, there is one final witness to examine. Poirot's moustache twitched. Bien! Bring her! They had kept Evelyn in the library since dawn, wrists in soft restraints, a police matron dozing by the fire. Now she entered the hall between 2 constables, veil discarded, hair pinned with brutal simplicity. The spider brooch was gone. In its place, a plain steel brooch shaped like a key. She looked 10 years younger and 1,000 years tired. Poirot addressed the assembly. Mesdames, messieurs, the Crown has its murderer, its accomplices, its motive. Yet one small grey cell still tingles. We will settle it here, beneath the wyvern, while the heavens themselves applaud." He gestured. The great front doors were flung wide. Wind roared in, whipping the tapestries. Rain sheeted across the marble like thrown gravel. "Madam," Poirot said, "you will walk with me." Evelyn's laugh was soft thunder. "In this deluge, you are madder than I. Madness is staying dry while truth drowns." He offered his arm. She took it. Together they stepped into the storm. The terrace was a waterfall. Lightning stitched the sky. For an instant the rose garden blazed, every thorn, every broken stem, every silver leaf. Poirot led her to the sundial. Its gnomon pointed straight up, a spear against the clouds. "Here," he shouted over the wind, "on this spot, 24 hours ago, you believed yourself triumphant. Look now." He produced the true will, sealed, witnessed, annotated, in Lord Harrington's crabbed hand. Rain spotted the ink, but the words stood firm. Clause 7, Poirot read, "Should my wife be proved accessory to my death, the estate shall immediately pass to my natural daughter, Clara Wren, in trust until her majority." Evelyn's grip tightened on his arm. Impossible. He never acknowledged her. "He acknowledged her at the 11th hour, Poirot said, "in the solicitor's office, while you powdered your nose in the ladies' cloakroom. He added the clause with a fountain pen and a heart scarred by your betrayal. He knew you would kill him. He simply chose who would rise from the ashes." Thunder answered. Evelyn stared at the dial. The shadow had vanished. Noon and storm had swallowed it whole. Poirot continued, relentless. "Clara sails at 6. The convent in Montreal has been wired $10,000 for her education. On her 21st birthday, she may claim Harrington Manor, lock, stock, and orphanage. Your web, madame, is now her cradle." Evelyn's knees buckled. A constable caught her. Poirot softened. "You have 1 minute to choose. Confess fully. Name the Vienna chemist, the forged charity draft, the second pigeon note, and the judge may commute transportation to penal servitude. Refuse, and Clara learns every detail from the newspapers. She will hate the name Harrington forever." Rain plastered Evelyn's hair to her skull. She looked suddenly small, a woman drowned in her own silk. "I will sign," she whispered. "Give me the pen." Bradley produced it. Black enamel, gold nib. Evelyn scrawled across the foot of the will, "I, Evelyn Margaret Harrington, do solemnly confess." Lightning struck the great oak at the end of the avenue. The tree exploded in white fire, splitting down the middle with a sound like the world's spine breaking. For 3 heartbeats, the hall was lit brighter than any chandelier. In that glare, Poirot saw everything. The thunder followed, a cannonade that shook dust from the rafters. Every window rattled, a pane in the west tower shattered, raining glass into the lily pond. Evelyn finished. She let the pen fall. It rang on the marble like a spent cartridge. Poirot took the document, folded it into an oilskin pouch, and handed it to Bradley. "Deliver this to the chief constable, then telegraph Montreal. Clara Wren, heiress. Protect accordingly." Bradley saluted with the pouch and ran for the car. Evelyn lifted her face to the storm. Rain washed the last of the powder from her cheeks. "Tell Clara," she said, "that spiders do not always eat their young. Sometimes they teach them to spin." Poirot bowed. "I will tell her you chose the harder web," he signalled. The constables led her back inside. As the doors closed, the wind dropped to a whisper. The storm rolled east, grumbling like a defeated army. Poirot remained on the terrace. Water streamed from his hat brim, but he did not move. From the first-floor window, Clara appeared, coat buttoned to the throat, suitcase in hand. Dr. Mallory stood behind her. She raised one small hand, not in farewell, but in benediction. Poirot raised his hat. The gesture was courtly, absurd, perfect. The motor car bearing Clara and the doctor splashed away down the avenue, headlights cutting twin tunnels through the dusk. At the gate, it paused. Clara leaned out, waved once, then was gone. Silence fell, broken only by the drip of water from the sundial. Poirot addressed the empty air. "Mon vieux, you built a fortress of secrets. Tonight the gates stand open. Orphans will play where murderers planned. The cradle rocks again." He turned to re-enter the house, and stopped. On the threshold lay a single white pigeon feather, water-beaded, luminous. He picked it up, twirled it between gloved fingers. "Message received," he murmured. "Thank you, Clara Wren. Fly straight." He tucked the feather into his buttonhole beside the rosemary. Inside, the hall was already changing. Constables rolled up police tape. A housemaid, new terrified, swept glass into a dustpan. The Wyvern portrait had been taken down. In its place hung a simple notice: Harrington Home for Orphans. Opening Michaelmas 1926. All welcome. Poirot paused beneath it, adjusted his tie, and permitted himself one small, satisfied sigh. Inspector Hale approached, helmet now in hand. "London train leaves in 40 minutes, monsieur. Your compartment is reserved." Poirot glanced at the grandfather clock. It had stopped at 3:17, the exact moment lightning split the oak. He tapped the glass. The hands jerked, began to move again. Time, like justice, resumes. 40 minutes is a lifetime, he said, but I shall not keep the train waiting. He collected his valise from Graves's pantry. Now empty, the butler's apron folded neatly on a hook. On the apron, someone had pinned a sprig of rosemary. Poirot smiled, tucked it into his pocket with the feather. At the front door, he paused one last time. The storm had passed. A rainbow arched over the rose garden, colours so vivid they seemed painted by a child's reckless hand. He raised his umbrella like a standard. "Adieu, Harrington Manor. Your ghosts are promoted to guardians. Guard well." The taxicab waited, engine purring. Poirot stepped in. As it rolled beneath the portcullis, the sundial's shadow touched 1 o'clock, the first serene hour in a century. In the wing mirror, the manor shrank, windows winking like eyes that had learned to cry and laugh at the same moment. Poirot closed his eyes. Behind the lids, he saw the cradle rocking, the pigeon climbing, the rosemary lifting its silver head. Somewhere across the Atlantic, a girl was learning that inheritance is not land, it is choice. The car turned onto the high road. The rainbow faded, the storm was over. And Hercule Poirot, for the first time in a week, allowed himself the luxury of a nap. Chapter 10. The Grey Cell's Triumph. The train for London was already exhaling steam when Poirot reached the platform. A porter in a brass-buttoned cap snapped to attention, took the valise, and led him to a first-class compartment smelling of cedar and fresh linen. The whistle shrilled, doors slammed, the platform slid away like a discarded theatre backdrop. Poirot settled into the corner seat, placed his cane across his knees, and closed his eyes. For the first time in 8 days, he allowed the little grey cells to rest. They purred, content as cats before a fire. Yet rest was not surrender. Behind the lids, Harrington Manor replayed itself in perfect miniature. And beneath it all, the rosemary sprig and the pigeon feather tucked side by side in Poirot's buttonhole. Twin talismans of mercy and flight. A soft knock. The door slid open to reveal a small boy in a railway cap 3 sizes too large. He carried a silver tray, a single cup of chocolate, 2 croissants, and a folded note on heavy cream paper. "With the compliments of the guard, sir," said a lady in York insisted. Poirot unfolded the note. "Monsieur, the orphans arrive on Michaelmas. I have kept the cradle polished. Thank you for teaching me that a name is a door, not a cage. I will open mine to every child who knocks. Clara Wren, soon to be Clara Harrington Wren." A postscript in a child's round hand. "P.S. The pigeon came back. I named her Hercule. She eats croissants." Poirot's eyes misted. He raised the cup in silent toast, drank the chocolate in one slow swallow, and broke a pseu, croissant. Steam curled like incense. Outside, the Yorkshire moors gave way to the gentle folds of the Midlands. Hedgerows flashed past, sheep scattered like spilled salt, church spires pricked a sky turning Wedgwood blue. England, washed clean, offered itself without apology. At King's Cross the platform was chaos, porters shouting, newsboys hawking evening editions, "Manor murderess confesses all." "Belgian sleuth unravels poison plot." A photograph of Poirot, hat tilted, moustache heroic, stared from every front page. He slipped through the crowd like a needle through silk. A taxicab bore him across London, past the glittering shop windows of Regent Street, down the quiet dignity of St. James's, and finally to the discreet bronze plaque, Monsieur Hercule Poirot, Private Inquiries. The flat was exactly as he had left it, mirrors polished, orchids blooming, the scent of verbena and good coffee. George, his valet, took coat and hat with the reverence of a priest receiving relics. "Welcome home, sir. The newspapers are in the study, the bath is drawn, and Miss Lemon has left a stack of correspondence that would sink a battleship." Poirot smiled. "First the bath, mon ami, then the battleship." An hour later, wrapped in a dressing gown of imperial purple, he stood at the window overlooking Green Park. Dusk painted the plane trees bronze, lamps flickered on like cautious stars. He held the rosemary sprig and the pigeon feather between thumb and forefinger. George entered with a tray, a single glass of tisane, steaming gently. "Anything else, sir?" Poirot turned. "Yes, a small favour. Take these." He placed sprig and feather in an envelope, "and post them to Montreal. Address Mademoiselle Clara Harrington Wren, Couvent des Ursulines. No message. She will understand." George bowed and withdrew. Poirot sipped the tisane. It tasted of lime blossom and forgiveness. The telephone rang, shrill, insistent. He lifted the receiver. "Poirot!" The voice was crisp, official, familiar. "Chief Inspector Japp, Scotland Yard. Congratulations, old cock. The Harrington file is closed tighter than a drum. The Commissioner wants to pin a medal on you." Poirot's laugh was soft. "Tell the Commissioner medals rust. I prefer croissants." Japp chuckled. "Fair enough. But there's a new puzzle. Body in a locked trunk at Victoria Station. Care to take a look?" Poirot glanced at the stack of letters, the orchids nodding in the draught, the quiet London dusk beyond the window. "Tomorrow, mon ami. Tonight the little grey cells celebrate their victory with Vivaldi and a hot water bottle." He replaced the receiver, crossed to the gramophone, and set the needle on a recording of Le Quattro Stagioni. Spring soared through the room, bright as Clara's future. Poirot raised his glass to the empty air. "To the serene hours," he said, "to cradles that rock forward, not back, to pigeons that return, and to girls who learn that justice is a door they alone may open." He drank. Outside, Big Ben struck 7. The chimes rolled across the city, steady, unhurried, the heartbeat of an empire that had survived its own storms. Poirot set the glass down, adjusted the angle of a single orchid, and permitted himself a small, perfectly symmetrical smile. Somewhere across the Atlantic, a white pigeon named Hercule was learning to eat croissants. Somewhere in Yorkshire, a sundial counted only the serene hours, and somewhere in London, a small Belgian with impeccable moustaches closed the book on one mystery, only to open his heart to the next. He turned off the lamp. The room sank into velvet darkness, lit only by the glow of street lamps and the faint silver of a waxing moon. In that gentle half-light, Poirot spoke to the quiet. "Merci, mes enfants. You have taught me that even the darkest manor can be swept clean by a child's courage and a woman's confession. The game, as always, is never the crime. It is the redemption." He bowed to the darkness, courtly, absurd, utterly sincere. Then Hercule Poirot, detective, friend, guardian of cradles and carrier of rosemary, went to bed. The little grey cells, for one night, slept the sleep of the just. And high above the sleeping city, a single pigeon wheeled once against the moon, dropped a feather that no one saw, and flew on toward morning.